Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Lauren Saunders. I'm head of our policy and research at Unseen, formerly head of our frontline services, and I'm joined on the call today with a few of my colleagues. I have over 6 years experience working directly with survivors of modern slavery, from identification all the way through trauma recovery and then onwards as survivor leaders working to tackle systemic issues of modern slavery response. So I'm going to hand over to one of my colleagues, our caseworker, who's going to give a little bit of an introduction as well.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm one of the caseworkers here at Unseen. I've been working on our frontline team for just over a year now. So working, frontline with our survivors who come into service, both in our outreach and in our safe houses as well. This is kind of my first year working within the sector, but been really enjoying working with Unseen and working with our clients as well.
And I'm Natasha Mitra. I'm the head of helpline services at Unseen, so I oversee the modern slavery and exploitation helpline. I've been with Unseen for just over 2 years now, and prior to joining the anti-trafficking sector, I have worked in non-profits addressing domestic abuse and criminal justice concerns. Over to my colleague Alice. You're muted, Alice.
That's embarrassing. Hi everyone, I'm Alice. I joined the helpline in October 2020 as a helpline advisor, and since then I've had a few roles at the organisation. I worked up to senior helpline advisor, then helpline manager, and most recently I've taken on the role of quality and development manager, so I oversee the training of anyone who's new to the helpline team.
Without further ado, we're going to go straight into the questions. So Natasha, I'm going to hand over to you to take the first question.
Fabulous. This one's for you, Alice. So if you can tell us, what is the helpline and why is it needed?
Yeah, of course. So the helpline is a free to contact service and it's run by trained advisors. We offer free, independent and confidential advice all about modern slavery to a real wide range of service users. So to survivors directly themselves, but also to businesses, to charities and the public if they want to make a report to us, and then also to statutory agencies such as the local authority and police. The helpline's really important for a number of reasons that I could probably keep everyone on all day about. But I think the biggest thing is because we have such a person-centred approach to supporting survivors. And that means that we will plan with survivors on what steps they want to take, and we won't take actions against their wishes. We also try really hard to break down some of the barriers that prevent survivors from accessing support. Because we're independent from the police and from the government, we actually hear a lot from survivors who wouldn't ordinarily approach statutory agencies for a variety of reasons. We have interpreters in over 250 languages as well, which means that survivors who can't speak English and who couldn't sort of actually find the words to speak to somebody about their support needs can come to us, can request an interpreter, and we can connect to them and speak to them. Also, really importantly, the helpline functions as an early warning system. So, for example, we were able to produce a report about an emerging trend of exploitation in the care sector, and that was because of our data programme where we recorded what we were seeing in our cases. And we were also able to alert the wider sector to an emerging trend that we were seeing, which was cases of forced surrogacy, which we'd not seen before. And we were able to let people know that this is what we're seeing within our helpline, and hope that other people can then be aware of the things that we're seeing and will know to spot the signs.
Brilliantly explained. Thank you, Alice.
Okay, so next question goes to our caseworker. It's a similar question. What are our frontline services, so our safe house and outreach support, and why are they needed?
Yeah, so on Frontline, as Lauren said, we do a combination of supporting clients who both live in an outreach setting, so that's people living in the community. For us, that looks like a variety of things. They might be in council houses or in NAS accommodation, so asylum accommodation or other settings. But we also have clients who live in 2 safe houses, so we support clients in both a male and a female safe house. The clients that we support come to us through the Modern Slavery Victim Care Contract. And this means that they're awaiting a decision on their trafficking claim with the Home Office. Whilst they're awaiting this decision, they get what we call ECAT entitlements. So this is the European Convention Against Trafficking. And this basically means that they're entitled to certain levels of support. So this is things like assistance with getting legal representation. We do things like mental health referrals, conversations around personal safety, and more as well. But at Unseen, we also do support outside of this as well. So we also think it's really important to kind of run wellbeing activities for our clients. So we've done things like recently, last week, we did a bike ride for clients, and we do things like clothing giveaways. And we find that doing this kind of, as well as the requirements of the contract, just enables us to give that extra bit of wellbeing support to our clients as well. So as caseworkers, we advocate and signpost our clients to help them access the support that is necessary to help them transition through their rest and recovery period. But we also do assistance on things like police operations, work with survivors at other stages of recovery as well. We do a system where we have survivor consultants, so people who have been through an experience of exploitation, who then inform the work that we're doing and inform wider policy as well, which we think is just really important. So the work that we do on Frontline gives support to clients who are recovering from these experiences and ensures that they have everything they need in place to kind of move through to a point of recovery.
So this next one is for you, Alice. So if you can talk us through what does a typical day look like on the helpline, if there is such a thing?
Yeah, great question. Exceptionally hard to answer. It's so hard to give like a typical day of what the helpline's like. As I said, we get contact from such a wide variety of people, so we could kind of have a plan at the beginning of the day for what we want to achieve that day, and it could end up being totally different from what we expect based on what calls and contacts come in for us. But kind of on the whole, for the helpline advisors, they'll be spending the day taking incoming calls, logging their case notes and the data. But they also respond to web reports that we receive and emails in, and people who send web reports or emails can request to be called back, so they might be making call outs as well. It can be a really varied role. They might be speaking to a survivor directly on one call, and then later on might be talking to a member of the public who wants to report a situation they're concerned about. And callers can also have a real variety of needs, and there's a big range of outcomes or next steps that we might need to take on a case that can also totally change the pace of the day. So we might speak to someone and we need to talk through options with them and give them signposts for support options. And then on another call, we might need to send a referral to another organisation asking if they can support this survivor, or potentially send a referral to the police and ask them to investigate a situation that we think is modern slavery. We also have other roles on the helpline. So the helpline advisors spend time recording their data about the cases, and then our data team can collate reports, and that helps inform what we're seeing as the extent of modern slavery in the UK. All these cases are reviewed, so we have senior helpline advisors and then helpline managers, and they spend a lot of their day reviewing all the cases and making sure that we've done like everything possible that we can for the people who are calling us. So yeah, real wide variety. So some people on the phones themselves, some people reviewing the cases, data officers pulling the data reports. Yeah, the time goes fast.
Yeah, it's really varied and fast paced, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Frontline is just the same. So I'll hand over to our caseworker to talk about a typical day on the Frontline.
Yeah, very similar to kind of what Alice said. I think you can go in with a kind of set plan of how you think the day is going to go, but it very rarely sort of ends up going exactly how you think it's going to. But yeah, as caseworkers, we hold a caseload of normally on average between about 13 to 15 clients. But again, this is very varied, sort of depending on the level of trauma that the client has experienced, and also the amount of support that each individual needs, which, you know, is very different client to client. Each of our clients is unique and has kind of a different set of needs and support needs that we need to cater to. So normally a typical day consists of a mix of client meetings and admin to kind of back up those meetings. So the client meetings are one-to-one, and this can happen either in our head office or we can kind of go somewhere that's more suitable for the client. So perhaps sometimes we go to their home or another kind of more confidential location that's suitable or comfortable for them. And in these meetings, again, that could combine many different things. A lot of it is kind of just seeing how they are, how they're feeling, what their needs are in that moment, if there's any kind of new things surrounding their case they want to update us on. But also within those meetings, we can help them with practical tasks, perhaps emails or admin that they need for referrals or things to do with their case as well. So we can help with those within those meetings. But also the kind of admin side of it is the follow-up from that. So it's really important that we keep up to date with logging everything on our system, making sure we're doing really well thought through risk assessments on each client to make sure that we are keeping them safe and keeping ourselves safe as well, and also doing case notes to kind of log that client's journey through support as well. And then we'll be doing any sort of follow-up from that session. So for example, if it's arisen from that session that client is in need of mental health support, it's then really important that we follow through on the things we're going to do with the client. So doing a mental health referral to be able to support them with that area of need as well, or maybe engaging with other professionals involved in their support. But yeah, as caseworkers, we then also spend time in our safe houses on a kind of weekly, fortnightly basis. The safe houses are supported by accommodation officers who are there every day, but we as caseworkers also go in and kind of help support the clients there with their cases as well. So yeah, it's a really varied day, and a lot of the time responding to new emerging things that are happening with clients. But it does tend to be that kind of mix of admin supporting the support that we're giving to our clients.
Fabulous, great stuff. Alice, so what would you say first contact is like for somebody initially getting in touch with the helpline?
Another great question. First contact can be really different, I'd say, depending on the survivor themselves, but also the kind of stage that they're currently at, like whether they're still in a situation of exploitation, if they're kind of immediately those first few weeks out of exploitation or later down the line. It can really depend on kind of what they need from us and how they come to contact us. Often as well for survivors, we're the first people that they've ever told their story to. And often, really sadly, we're the first organisation that has ever actually believed them when they've told people what's happened to them. It can be really difficult for survivors to articulate what's happened to them as a result of their trauma that they've gone through. So that first contact, we want to be like really trauma informed and person centered with them and make sure that we take the call at their pace. They don't need to tell us anything they don't want to, just really reassuring, you know, we're here to help you, we believe you, and we'll take you through the call. We'll take you through the information that we need to know, what we don't need to know at this stage, and then we'll look to see what support options there are for you. Quite often we'll have survivors who've been signposted to us from another organisation. And that other organisation will probably have identified some indicators that this person's likely being trafficked and say you should give the Modern Slavery Helpline a call and see how they can help you. We get quite a lot of survivors as well. Their first contact to us is from like word of mouth, and they've heard about us from other survivors that we've managed to help. And although obviously it's horrific that anyone ever needs to call the helpline, I always find it quite a positive that like survivors are signposting to us, and it just shows that we have been able to help people, and they're sort of talking about the help that we've been able to give and recommending that other people get in contact with us. So that always makes me quite happy when that happens. And then I think the most kind of urgent or like high risk situation we get is when we get calls from survivors and it's like their first contact with any organisation and they're actually still in the situation of exploitation. So it's really important we do a safety check with them and do a bit of a risk assessment about their call to us and whether it's safe to speak to us. And quite commonly in those situations, they want advice on how they can safely leave, but also if they're leaving, what support would be available for them once they're out of that situation, because people won't leave the situation or are very unlikely to leave if they don't know that they'll be able to get support once they're out. So we'll go through all of that with them on the call. And we can help and kind of give advice at any stage for a survivor.
Great, thank you. That's very interesting to learn. I think that the similar question, I think the frontline workers and that slightly next step in actually meeting with survivors face to face for that first time. So to our caseworker to explain a little bit about what that first face to face interaction looks like.
Yeah, so when we get a new referral come in, it's really important that we kind of make contact with them as quickly as possible. So initially, this is likely just to be a phone call within sort of the first few hours of that referral coming in. And the reason we do that is it's really important that we assess any immediate needs for that client. So some of our clients can come into service in quite vulnerable positions. So just through that first phone call, we're able to ascertain, do they have safe accommodation? Do they have resources such as food and drink and clothing? Like, do they need any immediate response from us in that moment? And that's just really important for us also to hear from the client and maybe see if we can ascertain if there are any risks that maybe the client doesn't see, but we can kind of identify ourselves as well. And then we try to meet with the client face to face as quickly as possible as well. So, like I said earlier, we'll arrange to do this in a safe space for them and for us. And this will be within the first kind of couple of days, ideally, of getting that call and that referral in. So when we go and meet with them, we have initial paperwork that we go through as caseworkers. And again, this is just to help us identify where the client is at and what they are needing in that moment and what they need to especially keep them safe in that kind of initial period of settling into service. During that initial appointment, we'll also take the time to really explain to them the NRM, the National Referral Mechanism, which is what they're sitting under when they come into our service, which is the kind of government contract for modern slavery. And we just make sure they really understand that process and understand the system that they're entering into and what they are entitled to, what kind of support they can receive from us, and set expectations around that as well. But it's really important that we identify within that what support is needed and help them to kind of find that. If it's a safe house client, it's a very similar process, but there's that kind of added layer of assisting them in settling into the accommodation. So they will be assigned a caseworker, but we will work in conjunction with the accommodation staff to also do that extra bit of helping them settle into a new house. The residents will have moved from a different part of the country a high percentage of the time. And so it's really important that we make them feel safe. We make them feel as though they know how to use things in the house, help them adjust to the new community, because that can be quite daunting for them as well. But I think the biggest thing we try to do is establish a level of trust in those first few meetings as well, which can take time. But I think really ensuring that client understands that we are here to help them, we are here to keep them safe, that we are safe people to support them, is kind of something that overarches that whole process. And like Alice said, just ensuring that we are using really trauma-informed practice in every step of that to help the clients adjust to service as well.
Yeah. It's quite a lot of crossover, isn't there? Lots of managing risk and assessing needs. This is a slightly more personal question about your experience. So can you tell us, Alice, about a moment working with a service user which has had a lasting impact on you?
Yeah, of course. I think there's quite a few. There's always those calls that like stick in your mind. But I think the one that I've kind of often come back to thinking about was when I was a helpline advisor. So I was taking calls and I took a call from a member of the public, and he'd booked some like contractors to come and work on his house. And that day, like one of the contractors had kind of broken down and got really emotional and just explained to this homeowner that he was actually being forced to work. So the homeowner phoned us and got through to me. And we were able to have a conversation. So we had him on the phone, but he also put it on speakerphone so I could speak directly with the survivor too. And we kind of agreed the parameters of the call and what we could do. And we came up with the survivor. He kind of told us that actually he couldn't do it anymore and he really wanted to leave, and he could kind of saw this man that he was with as a safe person. So we came up with a plan of how he could safely leave the situation and get support. And I think the reason that one sticks most in my mind was because I had that call and, we came up with a plan and I didn't hear anything back, which is quite common that we don't hear back afterwards. But then a few days later, I was back on the helpline and the survivor phoned us by mistake. And the reason that he phoned us was because he was trying to get in contact with his support worker. And I just had this really emotional, like I still get quite emotional thinking about it, because I just had that moment where I was like, he's trying to get through to his support worker, which means that he's getting support and he's safe. And I'm always so grateful that that man, the member of the public, knew what modern slavery was and knew to call us, and we could have this phone call and make a really safe plan for him to leave. And then the fact that we found out that he was getting support afterwards, I was like, this is a good day.
Nice to hear those outcomes.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. What about our caseworker? Could you tell us about a situation where you've had a lasting impact from working with a survivor?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most impactful things about working kind of, yeah, face to face with those survivors is being able to sort of see their journey kind of unfolding before you. And it definitely isn't always straightforward or linear. Quite often there can be kind of obstacles to overcome, or, you know, a process of recovery from a traumatic experience takes time and takes, yeah, a process of moving through those things. But I think for me, I've had quite a few clients where they've entered service, obviously in a point of real desperation and kind of still really struggling with the impact of their exploitation. And I've had clients who, yeah, have perhaps been very nervous to leave their home even to come and see me in the office, or I will suggest like community activities, but they won't want to engage because even the thought of meeting new people, that is really, really scary for them. But I've had a few clients who, yeah, watching them go from that point to kind of transitioning to a point where they're then volunteering with other organizations, or they're the ones suggesting to meet outside of the house, or using their experience to kind of inform policy. Things like that for me are just a really beautiful sign of recovery and of the importance of why we're here, to actually just point them in the right direction of the things they need and watch them engage with those. And I often find that it's not, you don't always see it in the moment, but it's kind of, you often will have moments months later where you suddenly realize that the way that service user is engaging with you is completely different to how they used to engage with you even a couple of months ago. And to be able to really see that tangible progression and recovery happening. And I think it just demonstrates the impact and the importance of how we can positively impact someone's rest and recovery period just by being present with them and just by gently signposting and advocating for them. So for me, those are the moments that are really helpful. Just seeing that rest and recovery period take place and being able to reflect back on where they've come from is really encouraging.
Right. Yeah, that sounds really good.
So moving on, this one is just for helpline. So Alice, how does it feel to respond to a call and not know what the situation is going to be on the other end of the phone line?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. As I said, we have such a huge range of service users, which I think is something that not a lot of people kind of realize about the helpline, that it could be such a huge variety of people calling and needing different things from us. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, but luckily we do such a huge amount of training. So the initial training period for a helpline advisor is at least a month, and that's before a helpline advisor will ever start to take calls. And before that, we do lots and lots of role plays. So that's something I do in my role now. And I'll like pretend to be a caller and I'll call the new people and we'll practice it as if it's a real call. So we practice for as many eventualities as possible. It means like on the helpline, we are constantly on our toes, and we adapt the advice depending on who it is that's calling us and what they need. But I also think it's really rewarding because there's such a huge variety of situations that like we can offer advice on, and we can make a difference for people.
Okay, thank you. And this question is specifically for our caseworker. Do you face any difficulties when working with people in safe houses and outreach? And what does the support look like when challenges arise?
Yeah, so I think, like I kind of shared a little bit earlier, I think one of the biggest things we face when people arrive is really depending on their experience. It can feel very scary for them to engage with a new professional. You know, if they've had their trust broken in the past through experiences of exploitation, I think something we often see is that kind of getting them to engage and see that we are here to support them can be really difficult. And again, this is a generalization, that's not for everybody, but that can be for some people who've been through particularly kind of traumatic experiences. And as a caseworker, I think moments like that and kind of seeing maybe the great need that they have and the high level of support that they need can feel really overwhelming. But I think something that we definitely learn in this role is to just take support one step at a time and to move at the pace of the client as well. And something I think we've become good at in our team is celebrating the small victories as well. So we often want to see the kind of big success stories really quickly, but I think learning to celebrate when somebody engages with a mental health referral out, or when somebody turns up to our wellbeing cafe that we run every Thursday for clients to come to. Those are the moments that we've learnt to really celebrate as a team and to kind of encourage when we see that in other caseworkers as well. So there are definitely those challenges that we face kind of on a personal level as caseworkers, but I think for our clients, it really is that sense of building trust. And the support that we put in place for that is really kind of just taking things at their pace. And I think the wellbeing activities are a massive part of that as well. So like I briefly just mentioned, we run a wellbeing cafe every Thursday, which is just a space for clients to come. We have drinks and snacks and games. There are caseworkers there. And I think having those opportunities to just build community and relationship really encourage other areas of support as well, because it demonstrates to those clients that we do really care about them as a whole holistic person, and that actually builds those levels of trust. So we also run things like an end of year party around Christmas, which all of our clients can come and bring their children to as well. And I think having those things to back up the other areas of support is just really vital in establishing those relationships, building trust, and also giving us as a team those moments of just relational kind of touch points with our clients as well. Yeah,
definitely having something to focus on away from recovery and modern slavery, I think, is really important, isn't it?
So, Alice, why did you decide to take this role and work with Unseen?
So I studied a bit about modern slavery whilst I was doing my degree. And then a little while later, like after the first lockdown, things were obviously a bit up in the air. I was browsing Indeed and saw the advert for a helpline advisor, which is a role I first started at Unseen with. And I'd read about it and read about Unseen and the work that they were doing, and I'd heard about the modern slavery helpline. I was just like, yeah, like this is a role I need to apply for. Then I interviewed with Justine Carter, who's our executive director, and I found out before the interview that she actually helped create the Modern Slavery Act. So that was incredibly intimidating. Luckily, she's lovely. And I was blown away by her and by the wider organisation, and then was very grateful when she called me a few days later and offered me the job. And that was back in 2020. And then since then, so I've now been with Unseen almost 4 years. So I took a step up to senior helpline advisor, and then to helpline manager, and now quality and development manager. So in this role, I'm responsible for the new training of any new team members, and in particular new helpline advisors. And that's really rewarding because I remember that training period and planning, those role plays that I was saying about and planning to take the calls. So I really like being able to support other people through that role and through the development that I also experienced.
Thank you. It's lovely to hear. And our caseworker, what made you decide to become a caseworker and Unseen?
Yeah, very similar story to Alice, really. I studied international development at uni, and we studied a bit again around modern slavery and trafficking within that. So it was something that I was just really interested in and began to kind of, look at the different charities working to fight against it. And when I was looking for jobs, again, saw the job come up on Indeed, and it just felt like a really amazing opportunity to do that frontline work and to experience what it's like to work in an organisation that is actively working to fight against modern slavery and trafficking. And for me as well, with Unseen, it felt like there's a really clear vision and purpose that I wanted to become a part of. So again, interviewed and got the job, and just felt like that opportunity to work day to day with survivors was something that I felt really passionately about, and felt like it would just give me that insight into actually what does the impact of modern slavery and exploitation actually tangibly look like on the people that have been through it. And just having that opportunity to learn, again, what does good support and healthy support look like for those people as well, just felt like a really exciting opportunity that I've been able to experience through this role.
So you both work in a very high risk environment. So with people who have experienced a lot of trauma, so how do you personally process the emotion of that and look after your well-being?
Yeah, I really resonated with what our caseworker said about the little wins. I think they're really important, and any win is a big win when you're dealing with survivors. I'm also constantly telling the team, and it's something I constantly remind myself, find the joy. And we work in a sector that is really traumatic, and it is really high pressure. But I always kind of look at it and think, whilst it's awful that there are so many people in these situations, it's really inspiring to see how many people care so deeply and so passionately about helping survivors. And it's something like similar background, similar degree to our caseworker, but something I've always thought like since my degree, in every like awful situation that exists in the world, like from natural disasters to war to slavery, you will always see people who give up their time, their expertise and their energy to help other people. And I think that's the same in like this sector. So I always try and like find the joy and just remember like how inspiring it is that so many people care so passionately about this. And then also for me, I just think it's so important to have like hobbies and have an outlet outside of work. So I'm really into the outdoors. So I'd love to, just at the end of a stressful day, luckily I live by the sea, go for like a walk, go for a hike, or go and have a swim in the sea and just like let it kind of wash away, and then come back like a fresh the next day, like ready to help more people. So having that outlet, I think, is so important. And it's absolutely fine to acknowledge that we do work in a really traumatic environment, and you're only human if you get affected by that, and you're allowed to need an outlet for that and like give yourself that permission as well.
Definitely. And our caseworker, how do you look after yourself when working with trauma and high risk situations?
Yeah, I think really similar to Alice. I think, like I said earlier, I think really at the end of the day, even if it's been a really hard day or something quite difficult has happened for a client, trying to see where there are kind of those little bits of hope still within those situations. And also for me, it's always remembering how thankful I am that we are there to support them, how thankful I am that they do have a caseworker, that they do have people there that have expertise to help them in those really difficult situations. And I think we as a team try to process really well, kind of both within our team but externally. So we access external supervision once a month, and that's for me is a really helpful space of just being able to process anything that's happened within the work that month that maybe has taken an emotional toll on me personally. Because yeah, like Alice said, you hear and see things that can be really difficult at times, and actually to be the best caseworker I can be, it's really important to invest in my own well-being and my own space to process. So those practical things, but similarly as well, yeah, I just really try to make sure that I have things at the weekends to switch off. Again, for me, getting outside is really important, and just making sure there is that rest time blocked in to kind of rest and recover, and to be able to keep going without burning out, I think is really important. So just accessing all of that support that's on offer and putting in things personally as well, I think is really important.
Yes. And one final question, and before we move on to questions from the audience. So what would you like to tell the public about the individuals in our service?
I think the biggest thing for me is that anyone can end up in a situation of slavery or trafficking. And I've realized that often people have preconceived ideas of like who victims and survivors might be and what they might look like and where they might come from and ages and genders. But the truth of the matter is that it can happen to anyone. And I also think slavery and trafficking to go through is a combination of like multiple forms of abuse and control, and actually like a lot of different overlapping crimes within that. And it can take survivors a long time to realize what's happened to them and process that trauma, and even to find the words to explain what's happened to them, or the way to ask for help, or to trust someone enough to ask for help. And what I would just say to sort of anyone who's passionate about this or discovering sort of more information about what's going on is that it's all of our responsibility to safeguard survivors of trafficking, and everyone should know what the signs are to look out for. We have them helpfully on our website. So I think the more people who know, the better, and then the more likely we are to end up in a world without slavery.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. And our caseworker, is there anything that you would like to tell the public about people that you work with?
Yeah, I think as I was reflecting on this question, the biggest thing that I've really seen through this role is that it's such a privilege for us as caseworkers to get to see that client as a whole person. They've obviously been through this really traumatic experience of exploitation and of trafficking, but the joy that we get is to be able to learn about them as a person as well, that they have hopes and dreams for the future. They have things they're passionate about. They have things that they enjoy doing. Like we had this beautiful moment at our Christmas party last year. One of our clients played music for the rest of the people there, and it's just those moments of seeing that actually there is so much to them beyond what has happened to them as well, and we're here to really process those experiences with them, but also get the joy of seeing them as a whole person. So I think it's just remembering that these are people with lives, expertise, skills, dreams and visions for the future. And the part of the work that we do is getting them to a place where they can really embrace those things again, where those rights and that dignity has been ripped away from them. I love that part of this role is that our support enables them to get to a space again where they can go back to the job that they love, embrace the hobby that they used to love doing, like listen to the music that they really enjoy. All that stuff that makes us human is still in them, and actually the support we give enables them to get back to that point. So that's one of the really precious things I think about casework, is we get to see that process happening and be a part of encouraging that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you, Alice and Caseworker. It's been really, really great to hear from you, and I hope all the audience have found it illuminating. Lauren and I will move on to a few questions from the audience now. There's quite a few in the Q&A section. I'll pick one to start. I think this one's from Stephen. So what are the trends we're seeing in modern slavery in the UK? And what are the common places of exploitation? So on the helpline, we see quite a variety of different situations of modern slavery. The biggest type of exploitation that we see is labour exploitation, so within the workforce. Within that, the most prevalent sector last year was the care sector. So that was the first time it's ever been the case. Prior to that, it's always been the service industry, which includes your high risk sectors, so nail bars and car washes. So the care sector overtook that last year, which was really interesting to see. We also see quite high numbers of sexual exploitation. That's been going up over the past 3 years and sort of plateaued last year. We also saw a slight increase in domestic servitude cases, and an increase in cases involving minors as well last year. And as Alice mentioned, forced surrogacy was something that we saw for the first time in 2023. So that's a new trend.
Okay. I'm going to take another one. So this one's from Barbie Nash. Does Unseen have an internal research team, and do you collaborate with external institutions? The answer is yes. So I oversee our policy and research team at Unseen. So we do various initiatives, joint working with academia, but also internal research based on the information that we obtain from both our helpline data and our frontline data sets. We utilise survivor experience where we can, getting lived experience inclusion in towards those research pieces. And you can make contact with the policy and research team via policyandresearch@unseenuk.org if you've got any questions or would like to participate in anything on that front.
Got another one here. So what's the most common ways people access the helpline service? So it is predominantly through the phone line, but we also have a web form available on our website, and we also have an app which we redeveloped at the end of last year, which is really, really great for professionals. So if you don't have that already, I would encourage you to go and download it from our website. If you just type in Unseen UK app, you'll find it. It has lots of information on spotting the signs, modern slavery legislation, and it's a channel into the helpline, so it also functions as a reporting mechanism. And we also have our web form hosted on some third-party websites and apps as well. And we do collaborate with the Clua initiative, who operate the Safe Car Wash app. So they have weighted questions, and if they meet a certain threshold, they also come through to the helpline. So we're receiving information from quite a wide range of sources.
So I'm going to respond to Kirsty's question relating to first responders, and should there be mandatory training. I think all first responders who have are going out and potentially interacting with potential victims, yes, we would definitely advocate for them having regulated training. In order for individuals to identify modern slavery, you've got to know what it is, you've got to know the signs, and you've got to know how to work in a trauma-informed way to support that individual. Many of those that we've supported over the years have explained that they interacted with agencies at various different points within their exploitation, and individuals within those agencies didn't know that they were a victim of modern slavery, or didn't identify that there was potential vulnerability factors that might lead to exploitation. So if those individuals had interacted with people who'd had training, there's a chance that they would have been able to come through either our helpline or frontline services. So yes, we would definitely advocate for any sort of support agency working with vulnerable people who has any concerns about risks of modern slavery, has training to be able to do that.
There's one here about county lines. So do you ever get contacted about teenagers being exploited to sell drugs in villages? Yes, we do, definitely. Criminal exploitation is something we hear quite a lot about. It's quite rare that we hear from minors directly. It tends to be members of the public, parents, teachers, other professionals that are contacting us about those. But yeah, it's definitely a serious issue. And as I mentioned, we're seeing higher incidences of minors exploited last year.
And there's a few questions relating to our wellbeing activities. So we do, as our caseworker explained, we do make sure that we are assessing risk quite regularly, and we need to make sure that all of those that attend that space have are risk cleared to be able to do so, so that there's no potential for exploiters to be able to join that session, because obviously that would put our survivors in danger. So any referrals into those programmes we need to take very seriously and in line with our safeguarding processes. But if you have anyone who's interested, please do get in touch, because we may be able to make it work.
I'm going to combine these two questions, which are about contact from the public. So we've been asked, what are the most common questions that the public ask, and what signs do they say have made them suspicious? So I'd say probably about a third of our calls come from members of the public reporting concerns. So either it's somebody, they might be concerned about somebody they've spoken to directly, or it could be an observation of suspicious activity. They haven't directly spoken to the individual. So things that tend to concern them could be signs of physical abuse or any other type of abuse. They haven't been paid properly, people's demeanour, are they looking withdrawn or frightened or nervous, and their interaction with their potential exploiter. Maybe the type of accommodation that they're living in, is that arranged or tied to their employment in some way? All of those kinds of things. I think we don't tend to get huge amounts of questions from the public. It tends to be people reporting things, but often it'll be, is this a case of modern slavery? I think this is a case of modern slavery, and we help them kind of assess that situation. I think that's probably all we have time for, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say we are coming to time. There is a lot more questions in the chat, so unfortunately we haven't been able to get through them all. But hopefully, if you continue to put your questions in, we might be able to send something out following this.
We just want to tell you about our new appeal before we finish. Our new appeal is called Through Their Eyes. It's launching later today. It's a new campaign that asks you to step into the shoes of a survivor and witness the challenges they're facing right now. So donations raised through this appeal will go towards funding some of the services that you've heard about today, and help to bring us closer to a world where all survivors are thriving, independent and empowered. So you'll be able to find more information about this soon on our website, social media platforms, and hopefully in your email inboxes as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.